Richard Gere, once the face of timeless romance, the man whose silent gaze in Pretty Woman could melt the world, whose strong arms in An Officer and a Gentleman carried an entire generation's dreams. For decades, he was Hollywood's perfect lover, the symbol of elegance and desire. But today, at 75, the story of Richard Gere is no longer a fairy tale. It is a tragedy that still leaves millions heartbroken. How does a man at the very peak of fame suddenly vanish? He was courted by the biggest studios, worshipped on red carpets, adored across the globe, and yet he walked away. No more blockbusters, no more Oscars, no more Hollywood spotlight. Why? Was it the night he broke silence at the Academy Awards, daring to confront China on live television and paid the price with a 2-decade ban? Was it the whispers and broken promises of love from Cindy Crawford to failed marriages that left him more isolated than ever? Or was it the shocking scandal in India, when a single kiss ignited outrage and set fire to his once flawless image? This is not just the story of a fallen star. It is the story of a man who sacrificed everything, fame, fortune, and legacy, to live by his own truth. Richard Tiffany Gere was born on August 31st, 1949 in Philadelphia, the second of 5 children in a modest, middle-class family. His father sold insurance, his mother kept the home, and nothing in their quiet life suggested the boy would one day become Hollywood's most magnetic leading man. But even as a child, Gere stood apart. At school in upstate New York, he was a gifted musician, piano, trumpet, guitar, an athlete who excelled in gymnastics and lacrosse, and a student council leader with a restless mind. In 1967, he entered the University of Massachusetts to study philosophy, but he dropped out after 2 years, chasing not a safe career, but a calling. First, it was music, then theatre, where he discovered a stage presence no one could ignore. London audiences watched him ignite the West End as Danny Zuko in Grease. Soon after, he dared to tackle Shakespeare in The Taming of the Shrew, and the bold, controversial bent. Hollywood noticed. By 1978, Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven introduced a new kind of leading man, brooding, silent, magnetic, without words. Then came American Gigolo in 1980. With one film, Gere transformed into the ultimate sex symbol, dangerous, elegant, untouchable. His rise was meteoric, but the higher he climbed, the greater the fall that waited. Behind Richard Gere's calm smile was a private life that tabloids could never resist. His early relationships were quiet, 7 years with actress Penelope Milford, then nearly a decade with Brazilian painter Sylvia Martins, who shared his spiritual journey and travels to Tibet. These were not scandalous romances, but deep connections that shaped his search for identity beyond the screen. But Hollywood's brightest star could never escape the weight of public fascination. Rumors linked him to Tuesday Weld, Barbara Carrera, even Barbra Streisand, a collision of galaxies that the press devoured. And then came the marriage that shook pop culture. Cindy Crawford. At just 22, she was the world's most desired supermodel. Gere was nearly 40 and already a legend. Their 1991 wedding was secretive, their love displayed on red carpets, culminating in that unforgettable Oscars night where they walked hand in hand like a golden couple carved out of marble. But beneath the flashbulbs came relentless whispers, questions about authenticity, rumors about sexuality, and doubts about permanence. By 1995, their love collapsed under pressure. Gere later admitted, "I loved someone who didn't yet know who she was." The divorce was quiet, but the damage was lasting. Hollywood's perfect couple had dissolved, leaving Gere lonelier than ever. For Richard Gere, The true cracks in his empire didn't come from drugs, arrests, or affairs, the usual Hollywood sins. They came from something far more dangerous, speaking the truth. At the 1993 Academy Award, while presenting an award, Gere went off script. Instead of polite words, he stared into the camera and condemned China's occupation of Tibet, sending love and truth to its people. The silence in the room was deafening. Days later, the punishment arrived, an unofficial ban. For more than 2 decades, the Oscars shut him out, and Hollywood studios, desperate for Chinese box office money, quietly turned their backs. His global career, once unstoppable, suddenly stalled. Then, in 2007, another scandal erupted at an AIDS awareness event in India. Gere kissed actress Shilpa Shetty on the cheek, an innocent, Hollywood-style gesture. But in India, outrage exploded. His images were burned in the streets. Warrants for his arrest were issued, and accusations of public obscenity filled headlines. Shetty herself was dragged into court. Though charges were later dismissed, the damage was irreversible. Richard Gere was no longer the untouchable leading man. He wasn't ruined by crime or scandalous excess, but by convictions, cultural clashes, and a world that punished him for daring to be different. Hollywood had its new outcast. When the spotlight dimmed, Richard Gere didn't fight to reclaim it. Instead, he turned inward. Cast aside by studios and banned from Hollywood's grandest stage, he found a new path, one defined not by applause, but by silence. He retreated to his Pound Ridge estate in New York, where meditation, vegan meals, and Buddhist practice became his daily rhythm. For the man once branded Hollywood's sex symbol, the pursuit of peace mattered more than fame. On screen, he chose smaller, independent films that mirrored his inner state. In Time Out of Mind, 2014, he portrayed a homeless man wandering invisible through society, a role eerily reflecting his own disconnection from Hollywood. These films didn't bring box office triumphs, but they gave him authenticity. Off-screen, his Richard Gere Foundation poured millions into humanitarian causes: Tibetan rights, HIV/AIDS relief, homelessness prevention. Yet he refused to bask in the glow of charity galas. No self-promotion, no press campaigns, just action. "I don't care about returning to Hollywood," he once said. "I care about how much wakeful time I have left." By turning away from the noise, Gere discovered a different kind of legacy, one built not on fame, but on compassion and integrity. Richard Gere's story is not one of scandalous excess or Hollywood disgrace. It is the tragedy of a man who paid the price for living by his conscience. He was once the ultimate romantic lead, Pretty Woman, an officer, and a gentleman, Chicago. Yet he walked away from the machinery that built him. He chose Tibet over red carpets, truth over comfort, and silence over endless fame. The cost was staggering: a career sidelined, a name nearly erased from mainstream cinema. But perhaps that is where his greatness lies. Gere redefined masculinity not as dominance, but as vulnerability, empathy, and conviction. He showed that a man could be both seductive and spiritual, both adored and outcast, both human and heroic. His legacy is not just the films he left behind, but the lesson that integrity often demands sacrifice. For us, the audience, his life raises a haunting question. What would you give up to stay true to yourself? Richard Gere gave up everything, yet found peace, family, and purpose in return. So now, we turn to you. Which Richard Gere role still lives in your memory? Do you remember the moment his presence first touched you? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we uncover the hidden truths of Hollywood's brightest and most broken stars.